Starting on the pole for race 6 of the 2013 HARC Pro Series season would be the 39 car of Andreas Allen. On his outside would be the 7 car of Kyle Pillanini. No more than 17 seconds into the race, James Davis would get to the inside, and with some help from the 007 car of James Bond would take the lead. Exiting the final corner on the track, James Bond would get to the inside of James Davis, and he would lead the lap. Just seconds into the second lap, Mitch McDonald would dive to the bottom and would eventually get by James Bond. Exiting the final corner, Mitch McDonald would be denied the leading the second lap by the 27 car of Ben Dover. Shortly afterwards, pole sitter Andreas Allen would get to the inside and retake the lead. Just seconds later, Nicolas Defort would get to the inside of Andreas Allen, and he would lead the third lap with some help from the 54 car of Gary Tang, who would, well, go for the lead himself. Nicolas Defort would end up leading that lap. You may have seen some cars go into the inside grass. They were just forced down there by, well, 5 wide racing, and they would have to check up, and basically the entire field would go by them. This would separate the pack into 2 separate groups. Meanwhile, back out front, the lead is changed yet again as Peter Saviano, with some help from Zach Harvick, has taken it. Getting into the last corner of the lap, James O'Shea would get a huge run on Peter Saviano and would get to the inside and easily take the lead with some help from Nicolas Defort. However, getting into turn 1, Nicolas Defort would get to the inside and take the lead for himself. Shortly afterwards, James Davis would force Nicolas by, and he would take the lead. As you can see from this aerial view, pretty much the entire field is 4 by 4 by 4. As we see Andreas Allen retaking the lead in the 39 car. Andreas would end up leading that lap, but in turn 1 he was forced 4 wide by Zach Koschneider, James Bond, and Spencer Fullerton. Spencer Fullerton would inherit the lead for a few seconds before being immediately passed by Peter Saviano, who in turn was immediately passed by Mark Nutt. Going into turn 1 the next lap, Mitch McDonald and Gary Tang would force their way underneath Mark Nutt, and Gary Tang would take the lead for a short time before being challenged by James O'Shea and Shrimp and Grits. James O'Shea would have a good run along the middle line, and he would take the lead. Meanwhile, a bit further back in the field, well, you can't really say further back when they're only a few car lengths behind the leaders, but in the big pack we have 5 wide racing as Zach Hofschneider is forced onto the apron. Now they're back to 4 wide as Gary Tang and James O'Shea currently fight for the lead. The next lap in turn 1, James Davis would get to the inside of Gary Tang and take the lead for himself. With hard-charging Nicolas Defort and Andreas Allen on the inside line, they would eventually get by James Davis and take the lead for themselves. Then into the last corner, Andreas Allen would get back by Nicolas Defort with some help from Spencer Fullerton in the 73 car, who would immediately go for the lead himself. Andreas would end up leading that lap before Spencer Fullerton retook the lead in turn 1. Meanwhile, back behind the large pack, going 5 wide right now, we have Damir Bejyanov, Eric Cesar, Jacob Young, and a few other contenders trying to catch back up to that main field, and they seem to be doing so as the gap is slowly but surely decreasing in size. While back out front, Zach Koschneider has taken the lead. Dixie Normus has got a run on the bottom, and she will get to the underneath Zach Koschneider with some help from Stephen Henhock, who now goes for the lead from Dixie Normus. So this is just pass after pass after pass after pass. Meanwhile, Dixie Normus and Stephen Henhock battling for the first place position has allowed Andreas Allen and Nicolas Defort to come up into the mix, and they were briefly 4 wide. Andreas Allen has taken the lead, but now Penn Isman is dropped to the bottom with some help from Peter Saviano, and he will take the lead. But here comes Peter Saviano, and now he will take the lead with some help from Spencer Fullerton in the 73 car, who is fastly approaching. And now the 73 goes to the bottom and takes the lead, but no, here comes Gary Tang. Meanwhile, we have a crash in the back, going 6 wide into the last corner of this track. It never really makes sense. And Nathan Gibson, Bendover, Pichu London, and several others proved that by causing a 13-car pileup. At the time of the accident, Connor Breton, who we have on board right now, is the only car to have been outside the lead pack. He was probably doing that to try to avoid the accident, but in the end the track was blocked and he was forced down into the inside wall. This wreck would put out several of our major contenders, such as Dixie Normus, Nathan Gibson, Connor Breton, and others, as we see Nathan Gibson retire from the race. Spencer Fullerton would lead the field down into the pit lane for yellow flag pit stops. Spencer Fullerton got a great pit stop and would lead the field back to the green flag. The 3 cars on the inside there, Brock McMahon, James Davis, and Leah Walker, are all 1 lap down. Immediately, Spencer Fullerton would be able to clear the lap traffic with some help from the 5 car of Luke Walker. Lap traffic is causing a bit of a stack up amongst the leaders here, as now James Davis goes to he's trying to get in the pits. Oh no, I think he's been spun out by Ron Young. Oh, Mitch McDonald's in the wall. We got a crash. Mitch McDonald's upside down, spinning down to the inside. He comes to a stop on his roof. Unbelievable. What was James Davis thinking, slowing down right in front of the leaders? Since the original camera angle wasn't that great, let's show you another angle here as Ron Young and James Davis were trying to get into the pits. Ron Young spun James Davis out, and then a melee ensues, collecting several of our major contenders, such as Alex Tanker, Mitch McDonald, Eric Cesar, and well himself. The 73 car of Spencer Fullerton would once again lead the field back to the green flag. Spencer Fullerton would get a big lead on the rest of the field, but Stephen Henhock would use his draft and slipstream by just a lap and a half later. Just half a lap later, Andreas Allen and Ilya Bondarenko would make it 3 wide for the lead, pushing Stephen Henhock to the top line. Andreas Allen would lead for a few seconds before Mark Nutt, Ilya Bondarenko, James Bond, and himself went 4 wide for the lead. Obviously, the drivers haven't learned anything from the previous 2 crashes. It would eventually be Mark Nutt who got by and took the lead. But then Ron Young would go to the bottom side of the track and he would take the lead. This shows just how fast that drivers can go from the front to the back to the front again. As just a few laps ago, Spencer Fullerton was shuffled to the back, and now he is back in the lead. However, just like before, Stephen Henhock would once again get to the inside of Spencer Fullerton and take the lead. Here comes Andreas Allen, though, on the inside with some drafting help from James Bond. Coming out of the final turn, the leaders would have to pass the lap traffic of the 23 of Zachary Brown, as James Bond would take the lead from Andreas Allen. Then a lap later, we once again had a 4 wide battle for the lead, as wow, Zach Hofschneider and Stephen Henhock are making a lot of contact as they are 5 wide right now, but eventually James Bond would actually retake the lead on the top line from Zach Harvick as we approach the lap traffic of Brock McMahon, who nearly makes contact with James Bond and then holds up the middle line. This puts Ilya Bondarenko into second place. A few laps went by, and no one really was able to challenge James Bond very much until James O'Shea got to the inside, going around the back stretch, D-turn, and he would take the lead. A couple of laps later, Mason Wood, who won just 2 weeks ago in Waltham, Massachusetts, would get to the inside and take the lead. Here comes Andreas Allen, though, in the 39 car to compete, and Andreas would push them both high, almost into the outside wall. Actually, as now Peter Saviano has gotten around all 3 of them. as we approach yet again lap traffic. James Bond, who got by Spencer Fullerton in turn 1, would get by Peter Saviano on the backstretch. Several of the lead lap cars have gotten stuck behind slow lap traffic, which is why we only really have a 3-car battle for the lead right now between Mason Wood, James Bond, and Andreas Allen. Andreas Allen would eventually take the lead from James Bond, as the pack behind is starting to slowly reform. Just one lap later, James O'Shea would get to the inside of Andreas Allen and take the lead. However, then Alex Stanker and Stephen Henhock would push James up the track, and eventually Stephen Henhock would take the lead on the bottom line. However, coming out of turn 1 the next lap, James Bond in the 007 car with some help from Ilya Bondarenko in the 19 car would take the lead. James Bond, though, would be held up by the very slow traffic of, well, Zachary Brown, and Spencer Fullerton would get out to a very large lead. Spencer Fullerton would lead for the next 5 or 6 laps as the leaders continued to battle with lap traffic, until James O'Shea in the 03 car would get to the inside and retake the lead. However, that would be very short-lived, as there was nearly a major accident there as James O'Shea crashed into the back of Zachary Brown, once again leaving Spencer Fullerton the lead. Spencer Fullerton's lead would be almost an entire second with just 5 laps to go. Would take the lead, and James O'Shea would go to the bottom like he was about to try and make a pass, but in fact James O'Shea had run out of gas and he had to come into the pits. Coming to the white flag, the leaders would experience the lap traffic of Jacob Young and Luke Walker, and Gary Tang would slipstream Peter Saviano. Coming up to the last turn of the race, Peter Saviano would be held up by the lap traffic of Brock McMahon, and Stephen Henhock would go flying by on the inside. Stephen Henhock has started this lap 7th, and he has pulled the ultimate upset by he's going to come down the front straightaway and win the race here in Green Valley, Norway. James Bond would come across the line 2nd, Peter Saviano 3rd, Andreas Allen 4th, and the 64 car of Ron Young would come across 5th.